Imagine stepping onto a treadmill and realizing that the machine humming under your feet wasn't born in a gym, wasn't invented for fitness, and wasn't even meant to make anyone healthier. In fact, its very first users weren't runners, they were prisoners. And the purpose wasn't cardio. It was punishment. Today, millions of people lace up their shoes thinking the treadmill is a symbol of discipline, endurance, and self-improvement. But its roots tell a story far stranger and far darker than the polished chrome and digital screens we see now. So how did a device meant for suffering evolve into one of the most popular exercise machines in the world? Let's dive into the surprising truth behind the question. Treadmill, why wasn't it originally designed for exercise? Right here on History of Simple Things. To understand the treadmill's origins, we need to step back 2 centuries. In the early 1800s, long before elliptical machines and gym memberships existed, there was a belief that hard labor could reform prisoners. Not meaningful work, not purposeful training, just relentless, repetitive effort meant to break monotony and build obedience. This idea sparked the earliest version of the treadmill, known as the treadwheel, a large rotating cylinder with steps. Prisoners stepped on its paddles to keep it turning, similar to a water wheel. But instead of generating water flow, it generated pure drudgery. Unlike today's treadmills, which simulate forward movement, the treadwheel held prisoners in place while forcing them to exert constant effort. It was intentionally exhausting and mind-numbing. Engineers at the time argued that this machine was a perfect blend of punishment and productivity. As the prisoners walked endlessly, the rotating wheel-powered grain mills, water pumps, or other machinery. Reformers praised it as a tool that produced labor without allowing idle time. What people didn't realize then was that this contraption would leave a long psychological imprint on human history, eventually morphing into a device associated with fitness rather than fatigue. Life on the treadwheel was harsh. Imagine climbing a never-ending staircase for hours under the watchful eyes of guards who weren't focused on health but on control. Prisoners worked in shifts that sometimes lasted 8 or more hours. The device required no skill, no technique, and no progress. It was the epitome of stagnation through movement. The monotony was so severe that inmates described it as the most dehumanizing form of punishment. Some prisons even had multiple treadwheels arranged in long rows, creating entire rooms of synchronized suffering. The treadmill's design ensured that users could not cheat. If one person slowed down, the entire wheel would falter. So everyone was forced into a steady, grueling rhythm. Unlike modern exercise equipment that adjusts to personal fitness levels, this early version demanded conformity through fatigue. And because the device doubled as an industrial machine, even the prison's infrastructure benefited from this relentless footwork. It was punishment disguised as productivity, a far cry from its future identity as a tool for wellness and self-care. The treadwheel spread rapidly across British prisons in the 19th century. To authorities, it was a perfect solution to what they saw as the moral decline of incarcerated individuals. Reformers believed that physical punishment built character, and the treadmill's repetitive nature was ideal for producing both discipline and deterrence. Judges even used the threat of the treadwheel as a psychological tool in sentencing, knowing that its reputation alone could instill fear. At the height of its use, more than half of British prisons had some form of treadwheel installed. It became symbolic of the era's fixation on structure and obedience. But while the government applauded the system, humanitarian advocates saw it differently. They argued that the machine did little to rehabilitate inmates and push them toward physical exhaustion instead of moral reform. By the early 1900s, after decades of criticism, the treadmill as a punishment finally faded into history. What remained, however, was a mechanical principle. Continuous stepping could be harnessed for power, discipline, or, eventually, exercise. The machine disappeared from prisons but left behind a blueprint that would one day re-emerge in a completely new context. The treadmill we recognize today began to take shape in the mid-20th century. For the first time, scientists started using controlled walking environments to measure cardiovascular health. The idea was that a moving platform could help doctors test heart and lung function with precision. Instead of monitoring prisoners for compliance, researchers observed patients for medical data. This shift was monumental. The treadmill shed its association with punishment and entered laboratories, becoming a clinical instrument. Doctors used it to diagnose heart disease, evaluate endurance, and study the effects of controlled exertion. The standardized pace offered by the treadmill created a scientific foundation that eventually translated to consumer fitness culture. In a strange twist of fate, a device once used to break prisoners physically was now helping save lives. By the 1960s and 70s, jogging and cardiovascular workouts were gaining cultural momentum. The treadmill, which had already proven invaluable in medical research, was ripe for adaptation into home and gym equipment. Early models were simple: flat belts powered manually by the user's steps. Over time, motorized treadmills emerged, making the experience smoother, safer, and more appealing. Fitness marketing played a significant role. Advertisements portrayed the treadmill as a convenient solution for people who wanted to exercise indoors, regardless of weather. It became a symbol of personal discipline, flipping its historical narrative entirely. No longer an instrument of punishment, it now represented self-care, efficiency, and health consciousness. Screens, incline systems, speed controls, and eventually digital programs transformed it into a high-tech training platform. By the 1990s and 2000s, the treadmill had solidified its place as one of the most popular fitness machines in the world. Millions embraced it without ever knowing its grim ancestry. So next time you hop onto a treadmill, consider the long, unexpected journey beneath your feet. What began as a brutal prison device designed to drain the spirit eventually transformed into a tool that empowers millions to take control of their health. It's a machine whose evolution mirrors the evolution of society itself, from punishment to prevention, from suffering to strength. And that's the surprising, often overlooked truth behind the treadmill and why it wasn't originally designed for exercise. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other bingeable channels. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.